All right, so one of the main arguments that we hear from these big pharmaceutical companies when we talk about, whether or not they should release the COVID vaccine patents or whether or not they should be allowed to price gouge the American people as much as they want, one of the main arguments that we hear from the big pharmaceutical companies is that they need to recoup all of this money that they're spending on research and development, and that if we even begin to touch their profits, then there will be no incentive to make any of this medicine. And so Katie Porter, who is best known for her whiteboard takedowns of a lot of these executives and corrupt executives, to be specific, had an amazing example of this where she completely obliterates this pharmaceutical executive while explaining how they're actually spending a lot of their money. And believe it or not, a lot of it is not going towards research and development. It is in fact going towards stuffing their own pockets. So let's go ahead and watch this takedown.
Mr. Gonzalez, how much did AbbVie spend on litigation and settlements from 2013 to 2018?
I don't have that number offhand. We'll be happy to give it to you.
Okay, $1.6 billion, $2.45 billion on R&D, $1.6 billion in litigation and settlements. What about marketing and advertising? How much does AbbVie spend on that?
Well, marketing and advertising, we spend about $4 billion a year.
Yep, 4.71 billion. How about executive compensation, 2013 to 2018?
2013 to 2018, it's probably on average about $60 million a year.
Try 334 on for size. Now, how much did AbbVie spend on stock buybacks and stock buybacks and dividends to enrich your shareholders from 2013 to 2018?
Well, stock buybacks, if you actually look at just pure stock buybacks, it would be about $13 billion.
Stock buybacks and dividends is the question, sir.
Dividends, and have to come back with a number for that over that period of time.
$50 billion. So, Mr. Gonzalez, you're spending all this money to make sure you make money rather than spending money to invest in, develop drugs, and help patients with affordable life-saving drugs. You lie to patients when you charge them twice as much for an unimproved drug, and then you lie to policymakers when you tell us that R&D justifies those price increases. The big pharma fairy tale is one of groundbreaking R&D that justifies astronomical prices. But the pharma reality is that you spend most of your company's money making money for yourself and your shareholders. And the fact that you're not honest about this with patients and with policymakers, that you're feeding us lies, that we must pay astronomical prices to get innovative treatments is false. The American people, the patients, deserve so much better. I yield back. Mr.
Have you ever seen a takedown like this before? I've never seen one that was that effective and that flawless, okay? That was a flawless takedown, fatality on his part. And listen, I mean, you saw the graphs. If we just pull up the circles that she was using, it's a vast majority. It's a majority of the money that they are spending is going towards stock buybacks and dividends. Okay, so not research and development. You can see the little pink square there representing the size that they're spending on that. Nothing close to the majority is being spent on research and development. So when they say we have to price gouge you on these life-saving medicines, we have to protect our patents on these life-saving medicines at the cost of thousands of lives, if not millions of lives, depending on what the drug is, they're completely fucking lying. They're absolutely 100% lying. And this tells you the perverse nature of having a for-profit pharmaceutical industry. I've never seen a better argument laid out for nationalizing big pharma in this country, because there's no reason why the profit motive should be anywhere near this industry. And you see why by basic graphical examples like this. A majority of the money is going towards the executives, the shareholders. Okay, so a majority of that money is not being reinvested in research and development as they try to sell to the American people. And the other argument on top of that for nationalizing big pharma is we're going to have to pay for this one way or another. We can pay for it publicly as a whole and invest in this and develop these drugs and then distribute them widely to the American people free at the point of service, because again, healthcare should be treated as a human right in this country. We should have a Medicare for all single payer system as well as nationalizing big pharma. But this shows you the importance of doing that exact thing. Think about how much money we could save by nationalizing big pharma, could save for the American people. Okay, so a majority of this money, you're going to have to be paying for it anyways, right? It's not as if when you have a private industry and you're not spending that money from the government, that's free for the American people. It's the exact opposite. In fact, we pay more for prescription drugs in this country than anywhere else in the fucking world, and it's not even close. And part of that is because our Medicare system does not have the ability to negotiate drug prices. Think about that. Every other, major social democracy around the world, right? Some of these countries in Europe, their governments have the ability, even where they have privatized pharmaceutical companies, their governments have the ability to say, okay, hold on, you're not going to price gouge us. You're not going to, force people to pay upmarket 1,000%, so that people are unable to afford it. I mean, here in the United States, on drugs like diabetes medication and stuff, people are having to pay thousands of dollars per prescription. They can't afford it. It's grotesque. You are literally killing people by setting up this price model. And they know that. And their calculation is basically how many people can we let die to protect our profit margins. That's the calculation that these companies are making. And that's not the calculation that a functioning society should be making. The calculation should be, let's invest in research and development as a public, and then let's use that for public health. Let's use that for the public good. That's the only motivation that we should have in our pharmaceutical industry, in our healthcare industry as a whole. So this notion, this idea, it's especially pertinent, obviously now with the debate around the COVID vaccine patents and whether or not the United States should sign on to that World Trade Organization waiver to relinquish the patents temporarily, so that all these other manufacturers around the world can develop the COVID vaccine and distribute it to all around the world. As this debate is going on, this is obviously a pertinent argument, because the main pushback that I've been seeing, at least, is that, oh, well, this will set a dangerous precedent. If you relinquish these vaccine patents, it will set a dangerous precedent, and the next time a pandemic comes, then they're not going to be willing to drop the money on research and development in order to do it. It's horseshit. It's absolute 100% horseshit. These companies make billions of dollars a year, and they're using it primarily on stock buybacks and dividends to enrich themselves and their rich buddies. They're not doing it for the greater public good. 100%, this is the best argument, credit to Katie Porter, that I have ever seen for nationalizing big pharma.